The van was quiet, save for the soft hum of the engine and the faint squeak of the suspension, still rattling from the long journey. Sarah sat in the front, Naomi beside her, with Benjamin, Ari, and their older companions, Bert and Honey, and Lorenzo and Julia, in the back. They had all survived the nightmare from Prescott to Seligman, and finally to Williams. As they passed the town limits, leaving the untouched streets behind, a sense of relief washed over them. The convoy had stayed behind. Wendell, Jason, Samantha, Don Carlos, and the others, securing the town for now, while the van creaked along the gravel road toward Sarah's homestead. The squeal of the suspension seemed almost out of place in the quiet, broken only by the gentle murmur of prayers. They had made it home. As the van approached, the front door of the house swung open. Uncle Leonardo came out first, his face lighting up with relief. His daughter Kenzie running ahead of them, arms wide. His wife Autumn followed, her eyes glistening, and behind them came Sarah's grandparents, Pete and Linda, who had stayed behind to watch over the home while George and Evelyn left for their weekend at the cabin. The moment Sarah opened the van door, her golden retriever lady leapt out, tail wagging furiously, running circles around them, barking with joy. Pete and Linda's Jack Russell followed, yapping happily, weaving between the legs of the family. Sarah jumped out first, running to them, her heart pounding with joy and relief. Leonardo swept her up in a hug, Kenzie's laughter mingling with the sound of paws on gravel. "You're here! You made it!" Leonardo said, his voice cracking with emotion. Autumn embraced Sarah and Naomi, whispering prayers of thanks. Pete and Linda stood at the doorway, their faces lined with worry, now softening as they saw the young survivors safe. Sarah's voice caught as she asked, "Have you heard anything from Mom and Dad?" Leonardo nodded, his expression turning serious. "The last we knew, there was a fire. Your dad texted that they were evacuating, but the lines went bad. We've been praying ever since." The group had stayed in touch through spotty service, coordinating their arrival. The entire drive, they'd listened to the radio, the reports growing more grim. Over 100 million jihadists had seized major cities, blocking highways and overwhelming resistance. SWAT and the National Guard were fighting, but the numbers were staggering. Yet here, outside their home, they were safe. For now, that was enough. The van's engine shut off, and a moment of stillness fell over them. Lady barked, spinning in happy loops, while the Jack Russell leapt into Ari's arms, licking her face. Ben stood beside Bert and Honey, the older couple smiling warmly at the reunion. Lorenzo and Julia stood a little a ways, smiling as well. Sarah introduced them all, her friends who had become family on the road. The world was still burning beyond the horizon, but in this small corner they were together, giving thanks. Sarah hugged Naomi tightly, then turned to her family, whispering, "We made it. Now we wait for Mom and Dad." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the family stood together, finding peace in the midst of chaos, and hope in the love that had brought them this far. The grace of God had spared them. Williams, Arizona. Don Carlos had ordered his men to secure the town, placing guards along the 2 highways that led in and out. 2 were posted in the old fire towers, 2 more on the water tower by the train tracks, and another team watched from the mountainside. Inside, Wendell and Teresa stood with Don Carlos admiring the tavern. It was a massive, rustic building, 2 stories tall. The bottom floor stretched around a courtyard, forming an incomplete square. A long oak bar ran down the center, with a small stage on one side where local performers once played. The air smelled of pine and aged whiskey. Lantern light flickered across the worn tables and leather seats. Upstairs, narrow hallways led to rooms that overlooked the courtyard below. "This is a pretty nice place," Wendell said, leaning on the bar with his arm around Teresa. The tavern owner smiled as he wiped his hands on a towel. "There's a lot of you, but I think we've got room. Some of you might have to double up." Wendell pulled out a thick stack of cash he'd saved from the drug deal. "This should cover rooms for me and my people," he said, handing it over. Don Carlos nodded, paying for his men as well. "We'll take care of ours." The owner retrieved a ring of keys from behind the bar. "We'll be at full capacity tonight. Breakfast usually in the morning," he said, lowering his voice. "But I don't expect any delivery soon. We only got a few days' food on hand." Ashley and May, the two girls who'd been with Jason, stepped forward. "We'll share a room," Ashley said, giving May a tired but genuine smile as they took their key. Jason, standing with Samantha, accepted the other. They followed the girls up the creaking stairs. They climbed slowly, one hand on the polished rail, the other clutching what little they still carried. The tavern staircase curved up through the lamplight in carved oak. Garlands of dried pine still hung from the banister, their scent mixing with the warmth from the kitchen below. For the first time in days, the air felt almost normal. Music from the bar murmuring through the floorboards, the faint clatter of dishes, laughter that wasn't panicked. Ahead of them, Ashley and May were talking softly, their steps light, a nervous kind of relief in every movement. Samantha watched Jason glance after them, just a flick of his eyes, the way exhaustion makes you notice things you shouldn't, and something inside her tightened. They'd all nearly died together. Now, with the danger behind them, the boundaries felt blurred. At the landing, Ashley turned first, her hair catching in the lamplight. "This is us," she said, pointing to the brass number on the door. "Room 205. She stepped forward and hugged Jason quickly, her voice warm and shaky. "That was insane. I'm still hearing the gunfire in my head. Thanks for getting us through it." He nodded. "You held your own." Ashley smiled and disappeared into the room, leaving May in the doorway. May lingered a beat longer, eyes soft. "Thanks for everything," she said, wrapping her arms around him. "I think I can finally breathe again." The hug lasted a second too long. Then, before pulling back, she kissed his cheek. Gentle, grateful, maybe a little more. "Good night, Samantha," May said as she stepped inside. Samantha's reply caught in her throat. "Night," she managed. The door clicked shut. The hallway went quiet except for the low hum of the tavern below. Jason turned to her, shoulders sagging with exhaustion, unaware or pretending not to see the storm behind her eyes. The warmth that had followed them up the stairs cooled into something heavier. They stood there for a moment, two survivors staring at the closed door, the scent of pine and smoke around them, before Jason reached for her hand. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's find our room." They walked the length of the hallway in silence. The boards creaked beneath their boots. Muffled voices drifted up from the tavern below. When they reached room 207, Jason slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open. It was a good room, better than either of them expected. A queen-size bed with thick quilts, a cold stone fireplace waiting to be lit, an armchair near the window. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, faint and white against the dark glass. Jason tossed his bag onto the bed. Samantha hesitated, then sat hers beside the armchair and lowered herself into it, watching him. He crouched at the hearth, stacking logs. "Could use a little heat in here," he muttered. Samantha's voice was quiet, but it carried. "So, what was that?" Jason looked back. "What was what?" She folded her arms. "That thing with Ashley and May in the hallway. The hug. She kissed you, for crying out loud." Jason sighed, flicking open his lighter. Click, click. "Yeah," he said. "We almost just died, remember? I think she was relieved we made it out alive." "That doesn't mean she should be touching you like that." He didn't answer. The lighter clicked again. The sound filled the space between them. Click, click. He adjusted the paper and wood, his jaw tightening. Samantha's eyes stayed on him, unblinking. Outside, snow began to sweep harder against the window. The world beyond blurred into white. Then, whoosh! The flame caught. A breath of orange filled the hearth, crawling up the wood until it became fire. Jason leaned back on his heels, the light flickering across his face. He didn't look at her right away. Samantha said nothing, only watched the glow rise and dance across the room, the first warmth they'd had in what felt like days. The fire caught and steadied, orange light moving over the walls. Jason leaned back onto the soft white rug, one hand propping him up as he looked toward her. "Look," he said, his voice low. "I think you're reading too much into this." He patted the space beside him. "You're tired. We both are. Those two girls were just saying thanks for not dying, that's all." Samantha didn't answer. The light from the flames traced the edge of her cheek, her eyes still sharp with doubt. Jason studied her for a moment, then added, "Remember what we talked about back on Williamson Valley Road? About trying to make something out of whatever's left of this world?" He waited until she met his gaze. "I meant it. I still do. I want to build it with you." He reached into his pocket and drew out a red and white Altoids tin, turning it once in his fingers. "You dropped this," he said quietly, offering it to her. The sight of it froze her. It wasn't the tin itself, it was everything it carried. A piece of the old life, the nights before Christmas at her sister's house, the wedding that had made her believe in calm and permanence. Miranda had found that with Noah. Maybe there was still a version of that somewhere for her. Maybe. Samantha sighed and looked toward the window. Below, the courtyard was alive again, survivors laughing softly, headlights sweeping the snow, people helping one another into rooms, grateful simply to be breathing. The tavern's glow turned the falling flakes to gold. Jason watched her, the tin still resting in his palm. "Come here," he said. She crossed the room and sat beside him, their shoulders touching. The air smelled of wood smoke and melted snow. She sat beside him on the plush white carpet, the warmth of the fire spreading across her skin. Jason turned the small tin in his hand and said quietly, "Here, this one will help you breathe." Samantha took one of the small tablets, recognizing its taste, and the instant it touched her tongue. Xanax. The familiar bitterness pulled her back to calmer nights, to a time before the chaos and the fear. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to let go of the jealousy that had followed her upstairs. For a few long breaths, there was only the sound of the fire and the hush of snow outside. Samantha's pulse raced. She knew that in a few moments she would stop caring. About May, about jealousy, about anything but the warmth of this room. But before she let go, she needed to be sure. She needed to know that Jason actually meant what he said. Samantha's voice cracked under the weight of everything she'd held back. "I'm going for something serious with you," she said, her words sharp but trembling. "Something real. We almost just died out there, Jason. From this attack, from all of it. And I can't keep wondering where I stand." She drew a breath, the firelight flickering across her face. "I need to trust you fully," she said, louder now. "I need to know you're committed to just me, damn it." She turned away, sinking down onto the soft fur rug, her hands pressed against the warmth of it. For a moment, she stayed there motionless, then rolled onto her stomach and pushed herself up quickly, her eyes bright with a mix of anger and fear of being betrayed. Jason didn't speak. The fire popped once, filling the silence between them with a burst of light. She was radiant in the firelight, every line of her face alive with fury and longing, her red hair spilling like flame across her shoulders. Jason could only watch her, propped back on his elbows, her ragged breath filling the space between them. The cold in the room turned each exhale into mist, the air trembling with both heat and frost. For a heartbeat, his mind replayed everything. The nights in the car, Ned's overdose, the sirens, the endless hustling and stealing just to stay alive. The ugliness, the noise, the ache of trying to find something worth holding on to. And now her, the one thing still real in a broken world. Laughter from the next room shattered the fragile silence, sharp and mocking through the thin wall. Samantha's head snapped toward it, then back to him, her green eyes burning brighter than the fire. In an instant, she crossed the rug and tackled him down, her palm slamming against his chest. Her body trembled, not with rage alone, but with grief, fear, and something deeper than neither of them dared to name. "Make me believe you!" she cried, her voice cracking. Her small fist struck his chest once, twice, before falling still. Tears streamed down her face, catching the firelight as they fell. "All that time," Jason said, his voice low, unsteady. "All the suffering we've been through, just to steal a few moments of peace with you in that tiny car. I could live that way for 1,000 years, if it meant being by your side." He drew a shaky breath, his words tumbling out faster now, raw and unguarded. "I remember everything you told me. About your sister, the hospital, the orphanage, the way you looked out for each other. I've never had that with anyone, Samantha, not once, until you." His eyes found hers, glinting in the firelight. "You're the only one who's ever made me feel like I wasn't broken." Her jaw trembled, tears still on her cheeks. "You kissed her," she whispered. The words hit him like a slap. He blinked, silent, caught between guilt and disbelief, the warmth of the fire flickering over his face. "The way she touched you in the hallway," Samantha said, her voice shaking but steady enough to hurt. "The way she kissed your cheek and looked into your eyes. You didn't flinch." Jason started to speak, but she cut him off, her eyes blazing through the tears. "Tell me the truth," she said, each word trembling. "I just want it to stop. I just need the truth from you, then we can go on." Her voice cracked on that last word, the firelight glinting off the tears that hadn't yet fallen. For a heartbeat, the room was still, except for the pop of the fire and the distant hum of wind against the tavern windows. The fair white skin of her delicate face flushed red with emotion. Tears broke free, streaking down her cheeks as she gripped his shirt, her fingernails scraping against the skin of his chest. The force of her anguish poured out of her in trembling waves, tears falling onto his face, her breath hot and uneven against his neck. Jason wanted to speak but hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't shatter her further. His hands closed gently around her wrist, stilling her frantic movements. For a flicker of a moment, he thought maybe he deserved this. Every blow, every tear, every ounce of pain she had carried for them both. Then he told her the truth.